Just a heads up before we get into today's video. Go and support the author and check out his YouTube channel, Black Volumes. It'll be linked below in the description. I'm selling it, my dad said. I can buy it from you, I pleaded. I've saved up a bit of money. How is that supposed to impress me? He snarled. A kitchen porter. Is that the dream career I imagined for my son? You're 18, it's time to be an adult. So no, I don't give a crap about your money. You're not buying the Xbox for me. You're too old for video games. Yeah, my dad isn't the best, so I didn't try to reason with him. I knew the battle was over before it even began. Out of context, I might sound like a spoiled brat, but that brief snippet of conversation was one of my dad's better moments. I could talk about the time he smashed up my vinyl collection with a cricket bat because it was, and I quote, music for babies. I could talk about the time that he brandished a broken beer bottle as a weapon. Yeah, he's awful, but he's right. I'm hardly a roaring success. I would move out, but my salary couldn't buy me even a shed. Mom died a few years ago and my sister's off at university, so I have to deal with the prick on my own. Of course, that's the least of my worries. I'm terrified of the real world. No, I'm not talking about the real world. I'm talking about the video game. Oh, you haven't heard of it? Yeah, that's the weird thing. I can't find it online. I can't find it anywhere. But my dad found it. Happy birthday, he grumbled. Yesterday it was my 19th birthday. The Xbox incident was a distant memory, so you can imagine my shock when I opened the clumsily wrapped present before me and found myself looking at a PC game. You can play it on the computer in the study, my dad said. I was bewildered. For a few precious moments, I truly believed that he had had a change of heart. The next sentence shattered that naive illusion. It's supposed to teach you about life, he explained. Maybe it'll get you off your butt. He strolled to the living room and sat down on his own butt, switching on the TV. Hypocrite. But as double-edged as the sword seemed, I resolved to play the video game and force myself to enjoy it. I wanted to devote every waking hour to it, even if it were a piece of crap. I wanted to waste my life on it just to spite my father. I read the front cover of the game as I walked to the study. The real world, a simulation. It was hardly a descriptive title. The picture on the front displayed a man's black silhouette on a white background. It wasn't a vibrant graphic, but of course it had been enough to entice my duller dad. I slotted the disc into my computer's CD drive and installed the game. The main menu was a blank screen with only one button: play. There were no options for settings, help, or even basic information about the real world. A crappy 2-quid game, I mumbled to myself. I clicked play. The game had a third-person perspective and I was playing as the little silhouetted man from the cover. I found myself in a white, expansive world. Again, it was much like the image on the CD case. There were 4 different metrics at the bottom of the screen. There was a green bar with the word life beneath it, a blue bar with the word water beneath it, an orange bar with the word food beneath it, and a yellow bar with the word energy beneath it. A small text box was also displayed at the top of the screen. It read, "Welcome to the real world. Survive." The text box disappeared and some small buildings appeared on the not-so-distant horizon. Everything was black and white. The buildings were simply outlined objects. I had to admit that I was intrigued. It had an original aesthetic. Okay, I said to myself. Perhaps the minimalistic game has potential. There were 3 buildings, each was a simplistic structure. The first had a sign that read, food. There were 2 long window panes and a door. Through the shop front, I could see long aisles of shelving and a man behind the counter at the back. The second building had a sign that read medical. The windows were white and didn't display its interior. The third building didn't have a sign, but the thatched roof and picket fence suggested it was my character's house. It wasn't much of a world. 3 buildings in a seemingly infinite void of whiteness. I could see myself getting bored of the game mechanics quite quickly, but I decided to give the simplistic simulation a chance. I strolled through the door of the food shop and started to browse the NPC's fine selection of digital grub. That wasn't sarcasm. There was a surprisingly extensive range of food on offer. Whenever I stood before an item of food, a small pop-up box appeared on the screen listing various details. For example, tomato pasta, ready meal, salt, high, sugar, medium, 500 calories. This game developer really wanted to create an authentic shopping experience, I thought to myself. But I went along with it because I was utterly fascinated by the minute details that the game had included. I filled up my shopping basket and walked up to the till. The cashier communicated via text box. "Good day, sir, is that all?" he asked. There were 2 options, yes or no. I picked the former. "Fantastic, the total cost of your shop is 56 tokens, he replied. "Thank you." A -56 pop-up box flashed at the top of the screen for a few seconds. I had no idea how many tokens I owned. The game hadn't mentioned anything about currency of any kind. Oh, what are tokens, I wondered, and how do I earn more? I left the shop and strolled over to the medical building. When I tried to enter the door, however, a beep emitted from the speakers, and then a text box explained. Opening hours are 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. I looked at the time on my computer. 6:14 p.m. I hadn't expected it to be a real-time simulator. Still, I was content to skip the medical center. What I really wanted was to explore my house. I sprinted to the door and swung it open. No need to lock one's door in the middle of a white, featureless expanse, I supposed. My bemused demeanor quickly vanished when I stepped inside. "What the heck?" I murmured. It was my house, my real house. With my heart pounding furiously in my chest, I explored every crevice of the outlined home. It was an exact replica, down to every last piece of furniture. Sweat poured down my face and I started to descend into a full-blown panic. I'm not one to overreact to things, but I immediately had a dreadful feeling about this game. Something about the real-life rendition of my real-life home had unnerved me. It felt like a violation, it felt intrusive, and it felt sinister. I was interrupted by a rumbling in my belly. It was time to make dinner and confront my dad about what was happening. I thought it might be a fake game that he had specifically designed to mess with me. A second before I closed the game window, I noticed something odd. A text box appeared on the screen. "You're hungry, time to unload your shopping and eat." It was a coincidence, surely. That was what I told myself at the time, yet a bitter chill coursed through my body. I closed the game and switched off my PC. No more of that nonsense. I bounded down the stairs and strolled into the kitchen to make dinner for my dad and me. I'm the cook. That's the condition I must fulfill to live in my dad's house rent-free. I often offer to pay rent, but he always changes the topic of conversation. The man loves power, and this fake simulation game, I decided, was simply his latest power trap. It's not real. I made a roast dinner, hoping to put my dad in a good mood. He had barely seated himself before I grilled him for information. "Where did you find that game?" I asked. Some website. Are you learning some hard truths about reality?" "Dad, did you commission a custom game to be made? How much did it cost?" "What the heck are you blabbering on about?" he growled. "The house is in the game. It's an exact replica of ours," I replied. I actually think it's pretty cool, fair play, thanks for going to the effort. I don't really understand the joke, my dad said. Look, just Google the name of the game, okay? Jesus, I thought kids were supposed to be tech geniuses. But make sure you wash the dishes first, I'm going to bed. And that was the end of the conversation. I was a little surprised at myself for not thinking to Google the game immediately, actually. It didn't make any difference, though. There was nothing about the real world on the internet. I found an online forum that discussed all manner of dark practices, and some users suggested that veil breaking could untie my soul from this evil force. But I couldn't find anything about that practice online. I decided there was only one way to learn more. I had to keep playing. My stomach rumbled again. I had just wolfed down an entire roast dinner, but I somehow felt even hungrier. As I loaded the game, I reached for some crisps and started to munch away. I finished them and still felt hungry. The real world had picked up exactly where I had left it. No main menu, no play button. I was still in the house. My stomach groaned. It was a little more insistent this time. I felt a stabbing pain in my gut, and that pop-up window lingered on the screen telling me to feed my character. Coincidences usually make me chuckle, but this one didn't. Horrible thoughts swam in my busy mind. Horrible ideas of what might be happening to me. Ideas that would soon be confirmed. My character was still holding the bag of food. I strolled over to the fridge and selected the unload option, and then browsing the options, I chose the tomato pasta ready meal. I microwaved it for a few minutes, plated it up, and sat at the dinner table and selected the pop-up eat option. My character started to eat, and his orange food bar suddenly filled up. He drank, and his blue water bar filled up. And much to my horror, I found that my belly stopped rumbling. I suddenly felt replenished, and worst of all, I could taste the food and water in my mouth. I jolted to my feet, falling backwards and taking my desk chair with me. I lay motionless for a few seconds, and then I propped myself up on my elbows and looked up at the monitor in a state of pure terror. My body was violently shaking and my mind was starting to slip into a state of panic. What the heck is happening, I thought. What actually is happening? Another text box appeared at the top of the window. You only have 10 tokens. Would you like to earn more? The yes and no options had returned. I sprang to my feet, limbered up and took a deep breath, and I picked up my desk chair. Sitting down, I selected the yes option. The text box updated. You can complete a challenge for 1,000 tokens. Do you accept? If this digital character truly were a voodoo doll of me, I would only have 2 options. I could run out of the tokens needed to buy digital food and starve to death in real life. Or I could blindly accept the challenge and stand a chance of surviving. I chose survival. Yes. The screen blackened for a whole minute. My body clenched and my breathing quickened. I watched in sheer dread, terrified that I had broken the game and resigned myself to the fate of dying by thirst, starvation, or perhaps even sleep deprivation. I could only assume that I was linked to the doll in every way, shape, and form. The horrifying consequences of that truth only hit me when the challenge had loaded. A timer appeared at the top of the screen. 5 minutes. It started to count down. 5 minutes to achieve what exactly? My silhouetted character returned, but he was now a white figure against a black background. White outlines of shapes started to appear on the screen. I soon realized that I was faced with an obstacle course. A text box briefly flashed. Watch your health and energy. Run, time is slipping away. I didn't need to be told twice. I sprinted down the long, narrow passageway before me. It was a rather derivative and stereotypical obstacle course, but when the stakes are life and death, those cliches start to become a little more petrifying. I paused, staring at the swinging axes that blocked my path. 4 minutes 16 seconds on the timer. I didn't have time to think, I just had to act. I sprinted recklessly through the sea of rocking blades and held my breath until I safely made it to the other side. That wasn't so hard, I could do this. A watery, crocodile-filled pit lined with lily pads. Easy. I leapfrogged my way across. 3:49. I could already see the doorway with the finish above it. Just a few more obstacles. But why did I suddenly feel completely fatigued? My energy bar, it was empty. A text box popped up. You'll be penalized for moving too quickly. Suddenly my character was levitating in the air. I felt my stomach lurch and I realized that I was no longer sitting on my desk chair. My body was starting to lift into the air, and I found myself suspended a few feet above the ground. I didn't want to call for help from my father. He would have fled and never returned. And plus, for all I knew, he had purposely dabbled in some dark ritual to create the game. Instead, I bit my quivering lips so viciously that it drew warm blood, which started to trickle down my chin. A stream of tears broke through the floodgates, drenching my cheeks. I watched the character on my screen, waiting to see what horrendous fate awaited us. 3:17. To recover your energy, choose a handicap. I didn't understand the instructions, and then I saw two options on the screen. A. Lose 20 seconds on the timer. B. Twist an ankle. I couldn't afford to lose another 20 seconds, I was already wasting time. I stretched my hand forward, still hovering in the air but desperately wrestling with the paranormal force that had suspended me. I managed to grab the mouse and wiggle it onto the second option. Twisting an ankle would be painful, but I had a terrible feeling that it might cost my life to lose the challenge and the tokens. I clicked. What followed was the most painful experience of my life. I expected a sprained ankle. What I was actually given was a mutilated ankle. The entity which operated the game snapped my left ankle in a 180-degree rotation, leaving my foot facing the wrong direction and causing my bone to protrude through a bloody, gaping wound above my heel. I screamed at the top of my lungs. I screamed until I threw up. My dad shouted something from downstairs. I couldn't hear him over my agonized wailing. He didn't come to check on me. I collapsed into my desk chair, left leg rendered a shaking, useless mess. My character looked much the same. 2:51. Feeling faint, I placed my unsteady hands on the keyboard and pushed forwards at a much slower pace. I made it through a passage of deadly darts, and all that remained was a small stretch of hallway before the exit. 1:17. I hobbled forwards, sobbing at the blazing sensation of my left ankle, and the massive amount of blood loss, no doubt. My character was waddling at a glacial pace. 59 seconds. Suddenly the walls of the passageway started to move inwards. They were closing on my character. They were closing in on me. Not like this, I whimpered. Being compressed between two walls seemed like a death too excruciating to possibly imagine. 41 seconds. I was confident that I could reach the door in less than 41 seconds, but I wasn't confident that I could reach the door before being crushed to death. 30 seconds. Just a few more steps. The walls were starting to touch my character's shoulders. I couldn't move quickly enough. I could feel the pressure against my real shoulders. I started to accept my fate as pain coursed through my body. I heard cracking sounds in my joints, and I started to pull my arms inwards, attempting to save any other limbs from being mutilated. In a miraculous turn of events, the wall stopped moving. I found myself squeezing through the world's tiniest passage, but I hadn't been crushed. I was alive. 12 seconds, just a few more steps. 8 seconds, a few more. 3. I made it. With 3 seconds to spare, I reached the door. The screen faded to black, and then I found myself back in my character's house. I had never been so happy to see an award on a video game. plus 1,000 tokens. I cried joyously, frantically pulling out my phone and calling an ambulance. The rest of the night is a blur. I know that I spent it in the A&E. The problem is that I wasn't thinking clearly. I was in so much pain and I had lost so much blood. I forgot that I needed to keep playing the simulation. I'm trapped in the hospital and my left leg has been patched up, but it certainly isn't operational. I can already feel the hunger pangs. And I slept for 10 hours according to the nurse, but I'm so tired. I haven't eaten or slept in the game. I don't know how much longer I can leave my character unattended. I have two options. I get home to the real world, or I find a way to break this curse. Time is running out. I left the hospital. I couldn't avoid the real world. My character was withering away and I was following suit. Firstly, to update all of you, I tried to resolve the situation while I was in the hospital. I called my girlfriend Darcy and asked her to play the game for me. She didn't accuse me of lying, but she thought that I had hit my head and imagined the entire thing. She suggested that I get help. I said that I would do whatever she wanted, but I just wanted her to go over to my house and take care of my character. I wanted her to do it for me. Okay, I'll go to your house and play the game, but I'm coming to the hospital after work. I want to see you. I love you. That was the last thing that Darcy had said before hanging up. When she stopped replying to my text, I found myself succumbing to intrusive thoughts about awful scenarios that might have taken place. What if the game had chosen her as its new host? What if my dad caught her and hurt her? I had to go home. As I hobbled out of the building on crutches, I looked down at my left foot, which was being held together by a metal rod. Still, there was no physical evidence that less than a day prior, it had been a mangled mess. And yet I experienced a phantom sensation. My foot still felt as if it were twisted around. I still endured excruciating pain. Maybe I need to take my injured character to the medical center, I thought. The taxi driver attempted to engage in small talk about my injury, but my mind was vacant. My eyesight had become hazy and I had a throbbing headache. I was experiencing dehydration, starvation, sleep deprivation, and possibly blood loss. My character was suffering, so I was suffering. When I leapt out of the taxi, I was on the verge of passing out. I burst through the front door, ready to apprehend my dad and ask him what he had bought for me. Where did you find the game? Are you trying to kill me? I imagined the things that I would say. But my dad wasn't home. I didn't think anything of it. I was close to collapsing, and I sprinted to the study and found that the computer was still switched on. The game window for the real world was open. I slumped into my chair and hurriedly raced into action. Drink was my first move, and my throat soon felt soothed. Eat followed, and the searing pain in my stomach subsided. Then I moved my character to the upstairs bedroom and selected sleep. Though I, the real me, remained awake, I slowly started to feel revitalized. I had survived by the skin of my teeth. The knot in my chest started to loosen, if only a little. Everything in the real world happens in real time, of course, so I realized I would have to leave my character in bed for several hours. I was still drained of energy, but after an hour or so of digital sleep, I no longer felt entirely depleted. My character's energy bar was gradually filling up. I decided that it was time to figure out how to stop the madness. I had work to do. Of course, I didn't want to exert too much real-life energy, but I still wasn't exactly sure of the mechanics behind this computerized voodoo doll magic. And that was why I started to browse the internet on my phone, searching for answers. There was no time to waste. I revisited the forum that I mentioned in the first post. I found the user, Guest17, who had told me about something called veil breaking. It's the act of recovering a soul from the world of the dead. I told Guest17 that it didn't really seem applicable to my predicament. This was his exact reply. Think about it. Veil breaking allows you to move your soul between realities. It might detach you from the voodoo doll given that your soul seems to currently be tied to it. Yeah, I wasn't buying any of that. I didn't want to add more curses to the pile. That being said, it wasn't a fruitless chat. I knew that I needed some sort of magic solution, and so I asked guest 17 where he learned so much about veil breaking. And that's when he popped up in my private messages on the forum. Not everything's on Google, you know, with a link that was redacted. The link was an invitation to a Discord server called XI. I knew that it was sketchy, but I was out of options. I couldn't depend on a video game for the rest of my life. I couldn't keep completing deadly challenges, living every moment in utter dread. It had to stop. I accepted the invite. The server had 547 members, and they seemed obsessed with all manner of supernatural things. There were numerous rooms, discussion, entities, exorcisms, heart charms, navigators of the void, veil breaking, voodoo, witchcraft, 11. I immediately went to the voodoo section and explained my predicament. I know nothing about the supernatural, but it certainly seemed that somebody had made a virtual voodoo doll of me. I hope that somebody on the forum might be able to help. The first reply was a little harsh. Effigies aren't actually linked to voodoo culture, you filthy casual. Who let you onto the server? It's private. Fortunately, one of the other replies were a little friendlier. Yeah, our Ren is right, but he's also not the nicest. You're in serious danger. Technological magic is the specialty of RipRip78, message him. So I messaged RipRip78 and I waited and waited, but no reply. Around 3 p.m., 6 hours after returning from the hospital, my stomach started to rumble. Really, my character's sleeping and he ate before going to bed, I thought to myself, sighing. I looked at the game window for the real world and my jaw froze. My character's food bar was practically full. It dawned on me that I didn't just have to keep myself alive in the game. I still had to eat, drink, and sleep in the real world. I would have to survive through 2 different bodies. I stumbled into the darkened kitchen, overcome with a terrible feeling of powerlessness. How long can I keep this up? I wondered, as I eyeballed the ready meal that was rotating in the microwave. I'd have to keep performing deadly challenges to earn tokens and keep working in the real world to earn money. My manager had taken me off the kitchen rota while I recovered, but there were still real-life bills to be paid, and it seemed my dad had finally left town, so he wasn't going to be paying his way. I strolled back into the study, tucking into my bowl of macaroni and cheese. Still no reply from RipRip78. While I waited, I decided that I had to do something about the agonizing pain in my foot. It had been treated in the real world, but it still had the phantom sensation of being twisted and mutilated. I looked at the game window. My character's health bar had been depleted to the extent that it was orange in color. If I could heal him, perhaps my real-world pain would subside. It was worth a try. I decided that 6 hours of rest would be sufficient, so I tore my character out of bed. It was time to finally explore the medical building. I had to be quick, it would be shutting shortly after all. My character limped out of the front door, facing the white nothingness of the horrendous landscape. Turning to my right, I strolled over to the building beside me. This time, the door wasn't locked. I strolled through it, feeling uneasy about the potential horrors that might lie within. I had expected a local health clinic. I had expected to be told that I needed to ring and come back when I had an appointment, but instead I was faced with a bizarrely enormous hospital. There was an expansive waiting area, and it was overflowing with silhouetted NPCs. This was even more detailed than the shop. There had been jolly elevator-style music in the food store. In the medical building, however, there were sparse, dissonant piano notes playing. It filled me with both sorrow and horror in equal measure. There is something wrong with the idea of cold piano planks being chosen as the background music for a building filled with such life, even though it was artificial life. Additionally, the building, like a TARDIS, was far larger on the inside. In the center of the open-plan ground floor, there was a staircase which led up to numerous levels. Moving my character's POV upwards, I could see the interior of the hospital building, all the way up to the very top floor. The staircase zigzagged upwards. I counted 6 levels to the building. Remembering why I came, I walked over to the reception desk. I prayed for a brief break from realism. No waiting times and no need for appointments. Just let me see the doctor. And my wish was granted. The silhouetted woman spoke through text boxes, much like the cashier at the food shop. "Hello, my name's Kira. How can I help you?" "I need to see a doctor. I want to volunteer." The second option unnerved me. Volunteer to do what? I wondered. I selected the first option, obviously. "Dr. Ted will see you on the 3rd floor, room 319. That'll cost 500 tokens, thank you." Figures, I thought, watching the -500 pop-up window come and go. I strolled up the stairs, trying my best to ignore the haunting piano music that filled this eerie white, black outline building. I thought about muting the game, believe me, but 2 things stopped me. 1, I didn't want the game to penalize me again. I might not survive my next trip to the hospital. And 2, I didn't want to miss anything. For all I knew, I might miss something important if I were to mute the game. I decided to soldier onwards, weaving in and out of silhouetted doctors and civilians. When I reached the 3rd floor, I followed the numbers until I reached room 319. I strolled inside and a silhouetted doctor was waiting for me. A text box appeared. "My name is Dr. Ted. What seems to be the problem?" "I have a headache. I have a mental health problem. I severed a bone in the challenge." I selected the sadistic option at the bottom, obviously. It felt as if the game were tormenting me. It knew exactly why I had come into the medical building. I was horrified by the prospect of some intelligent entity watching my every move and terrorizing me. Another text box popped up. "Let me have a look." Okay, that's an easy fix." Seconds later, the pain in my real-life ankle had subsided. My character stood upright, seemingly better. "Thank you, Archie Bolton. Come again." My blood turned to ice in my veins. I had never specified my name while playing the game. The real world knew me. I mean, of course it knew me. Why should I be so shocked by that? And yet, something about seeing my name on the screen made the curse feel so much more unbelievably frightening. The torture felt personal, I suppose. With full bars across the board, I exited room 319 and strolled over to the 3rd floor balcony that overlooked everything from the ground floor below to the very top floor. Every moment of time that I spent in the game was chilling, but I didn't see what other option I had. There had still been no reply from RipRip78 on my phone. I had to learn about the mechanics of the real world. If I could figure out the game, maybe I could beat it. And that was when I noticed something. The dissonant piano was no longer the only audible sound in the hospital. I could hear voices, shouting. I saw movement on the other side of the building. Silhouetted NPCs were dragging 2 squirming silhouettes along the 2nd floor hallway. "Where the heck are we?" a girl wailed. "Let me go," a man bellowed. I immediately recognized both voices. The girl was Darcy and the man was my dad. Unable to accept this dreadful twist in the game's vendetta against me, I found myself disassociating from everything. There was ringing in my ears as I fervently struggled to process what was happening. I scrambled for some sort of explanation, but I had nothing. I moved my characters down the stairs, exiting down to the 2nd floor, following the silhouetted figures from a safe distance. I hoped with every fiber of my being to ascertain that they were not, in fact, capturing my girlfriend and my dad. The large group of striding shadows entered a door on the right. The sign above it read, "Surgery." I burst through the doorway, throwing caution to the wind in my blind panic. Behind the door, of course, was yet another narrow hallway, and I could hear Darcy at the end of the corridor. She was bawling her eyes out. "Darcy!" I bellowed. She didn't respond, but she kept crying. I had a microphone connected to my computer, but I realized that Darcy probably couldn't hear me. The game had no settings after all. There was no option to switch a microphone on and off. I was unable to communicate. And so I watched helplessly as the 5 silhouetted NPCs dragged Darcy and my dad into an operating room on their left. I realized that long windows spanned the entire hallway, so I could see into the room. My hands froze on the keyboard and I stood and watched. The voices within the room were muffled, but Darcy was shouting at such volume that I could hear her clearly. "What have you done with us? What is this place?" she cried. "I'll kill you," my dad raged, frothing at the mouth. The 5 silent NPCs started to strap my girlfriend and my dad to 2 separate operating tables. The hospital's background music became foreground music. The slightly out-of-tune piano plinks now resonated powerfully atop the screams of the 2 victims. Even in such a desolate world of black, outlined shapes painted against a white backdrop, everything felt real. In fact, what followed was the most real thing I've ever seen. I could see one of the NPCs fiddling on a computer, as if they had transmitted a message to me. A pop-up box appeared on my screen and it read, "How should we proceed? Save them, minus 10,000 tokens. Kill them, plus 10,000 tokens. I repeatedly clicked save them, but a deafening buzzing noise sounded with every click, and the same message incessantly popped up. Insufficient tokens. Well, give me a challenge to earn some tokens then. I screamed at the screen, tears rolling down my cheeks. Another window popped up. Only the original player can operate the simulated character. Unauthorized players must face trial in the real world. Select an option. Save them minus 10,000 tokens. Kill them plus 10,000 tokens. I placed my face in my palms and sobbed. Truthfully, I didn't give a moment's thought for my villainous father. I was thinking of Darcy and only Darcy, the beautiful red-headed girl who radiated such warmth and vibrant color. And now she was reduced to a black silhouette, writhing on an outlined operating table. Another window popped up. Pick an option, you have 10 seconds. You won't let me pick the option that I want, I blubbered. The offer is timed out. The real world has chosen to kill them. No, I screeched. One of the figures picked up a large bucket and started pouring a white liquid with a black outline over Darcy's body. Horrifyingly as loudly as she screamed, her voice was mostly lost in the sea of piercing piano notes that seemed to be building towards a vile crescendo. As the piano played, cheapening to the very real terror that my girlfriend was enduring, I had never felt so utterly powerless and petrified. She emitted a scream that I'm sure barely began to express the grueling brutality of her suffering. As the white liquid poured over Darcy, her body started to melt, transforming before my eyes from a black silhouette into a black pool of liquid. Her final pained wail swiftly transitioned into a haunting and warbling whisper, as if she were gargling water, and she became a black, gooey liquid that trickled down the sides of the outlined operating table. I could not speak, I could not blink, I could not move. Don't you bring that near me, my dad growled. No, let me out of these restraints. Let's fight properly. And I hated him. I hated my dad more than I had ever hated anything. He bought the real world as a form of psychological torture, even if he hadn't quite anticipated the horrors that would unfold. It was his fault that Darcy was dead. Hey, my dad shouted. Who's watching us from the hallway? Is that Archie? Are you playing the game, Archie? It's your dad, help. I didn't respond. I was completely devoid of feeling for the monster in the shackles. Archie, My dad yelled, seemingly stung by my inaction. He soon showed his true colors. "You waste of space. I nearly smothered you in your sleep when you were a kid, you know. Could have crushed you like a bug. I should have done it, I should have." I locked my gaze onto Darcy's liquefied body, tears stinging my eyes and dread consuming my heart as the NPC with the bucket started to pour. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw my dad melt into the same pool as Darcy. It was a gruesome sight even though I despised him. His screams rapidly dissipated. Everything was still. There was no sound other than the sinister piano melody that played ceaselessly. I wiped the tears from my eyes and looked at my screen. As I watched the NPCs, my heart started to thump frantically against the inside of my ribcage. The motionless silhouettes were facing the window. They were facing me. Pulling me back into the real world, my phone buzzed. Rip78 had replied. The figures started to exit the operating room. Petrified, I made my character run towards the hallway door and sprint onto the second-floor balcony. All of the NPCs in the medical building were immobilized. Their bodies, however, swiveled on the spot so that they were always facing me. Avoiding them, I ran down the stairs. I didn't know whether the 5 silhouetted monsters from the operating room were still chasing me, but I didn't stop to check. Hurtling across the main lobby, I weaved between the swiveling statues. They littered the waiting area and followed my every move with their empty faces. I reached the main hospital door, turned left, and tried to ignore the splitting pain in my sides. My energy bar was rapidly draining. I was surprised to find my house door unlocked, as I thought the game might lock me out and leave me to whatever twisted fate the NPCs had in mind. The second that I was inside, I closed the door and selected the lock option, and I backed towards the kitchen. Multiple text boxes started to pop up, indicating that the 5 murderous NPCs were in fact at my front door. "Let us in. Do you want to earn 5,000 tokens? Let me in. You can just let me in. Forget the others. 50,000 tokens." Feeling utterly depleted and not yet brave enough to look at Rip78's message, I moved my character to the fridge and looked inside. Nothing. It was empty. Another punishment, I assumed. Instead, I filled up a glass of water from the tap and both my water and energy bars started to replenish. But I was still so hungry. And then a window popped up. For the sake of realism and immersion, certain food items are kept outside of the fridge. Suddenly, there was a bouncing arrow over the fruit bowl on my character's dining table. There were still some pixelated apples inside. I ran over, selected eat, and breathed a sigh of relief as the ache in my gut began to ease. Another pop-up window appeared. "Uh-oh, it looks like your fruit might be moldy." As my character bent forwards and started to projectile vomit a black substance, I felt an unsettled grumble in my real-life stomach. Ah, crap. I expected vomit, but I should have known that the grueling simulation would have something much more sickening in store for me. I bent forwards, mirroring my character's position, feeling a blazing sensation in the back of my throat. I projectile vomited a thick black gooey substance that looked identical to the one my character had just produced. Knees knocking together as I trembled in terror, a second wave of black vomit, thick in consistency, flew from my mouth. This time, something horrific was moving in the black substance that was coating my computer desk. Caterpillars. Hundreds and hundreds of caterpillars wriggling and drowning in the thick, unidentifiable black bile that surrounded me. They had come out of me. Screaming at the terrifying sight before me, I was even more horrified to see the caterpillars slowly morph into black goo, much like my dad and Darcy. They became one with the evil substance that was dripping from my desk. The creatures unleashed a tiny chorus of haunting wails as they melted. As far as I know, caterpillars don't wail, but the real world doesn't exactly abide by the laws of nature. Whether in the game or reality, I was taunted by another pop-up message. Whoops, Just like the real world, you can't always trust fruit. Looks like some hungry little caterpillars found their way into your apples. With my sleeve, I wiped the repulsive bile from my lips and finally picked up my phone. I opened Discord. A message from RipRip78. Firstly, don't delete the game. It needs to be destroyed with a ritual. We're not just trying to destroy the effigy, we're trying to sever the connection. I read your message and I'm sorry for the late reply, but I've spent the last few hours developing a game extension for you. It's essentially a virus. Put the attachment in the main folder for the real world. I know you shouldn't download files from a stranger, but you don't really have a choice. Time is not your friend. You're gonna have to trust me. The file was called ritual.gc. I asked him about the file extension. I'm not a tech whiz, but I've never seen the GC file type before. It's gray code. Take a look in the folder for the real world. I did. The real world, index.gc. That was the only file in the folder, so naturally, I asked him about gray code. It's evil stuff. Probably the worst kind of tech magic. I would rather not talk about it. You should not mess with it. I've only ever programmed something in gray code once. Well, I guess that I've now done it twice. Yeah, I don't know whether that ritual.gc file can help, but your dad didn't tell you anything about where he found the game or who made it. With the knowledge that I have at my disposal, this is the best that I can do. I downloaded the file and put it into the folder. Okay, I developed a 2-part ritual in gray code. It's based on stuff I read about destroying physical voodoo dolls, so let's hope that it works for digital ones. Within the game, when you've installed my extension, you're going to cleanse your character with fire, and then you're going to cleanse it with water. You won't have much time to complete the ritual. The entity is going to fight hard to keep you as its host. The next pop-up window read, "Extension has been successfully installed. Cheat code detected. Penalty for seeking help outside the simulation. Break a leg, minus 10,000 tokens. Lose an eye, plus 100,000 tokens." I didn't have 10,000 tokens, and the game knew that. I told RipRip78, hoping that he would be able to help me. Ignore its demands, focus on the ritual. The installation of my extension must have actually worked. I told you that the game wouldn't give up without a fight. Just keep going. You should see the golden doorway that I created. Has it appeared? Another pop-up window. Do not enter. Suddenly a pixelated golden doorway appeared in the middle of the kitchen. I was a little mesmerized by the sudden burst of color on my screen. The door oozed with warmth in the midst of that barren black and white outlined environment. Finally, I had found a slim spark of hope in the heart of such a dismal place. My joy was short-lived, however, as the next text box violently displayed itself. Offer is timed out. You do not have 10,000 tokens, so the real world has selected the only available option. Congratulations, you're about to earn 100,000 tokens. Lose an eye plus 100,000 tokens. My body clammed up. Flooded with a feeling of revulsion, I started to notice a sensation at the back of my retina. It was a prodding sensation, as if somebody were gently tapping a ball with a snooker cue. The gentleness quickly transformed into a brutish thumping. I wailed in agony, clutching at my left eye with both hands and trying to stop it from being forcefully removed from its socket. I could feel an excruciating tearing sensation. My phone was pinging with messages from RipRip78, but I was flailing wildly on my desk chair, futilely striving to save my eye. I felt something warm trickle down my hands, blood. It started to trickle down my face too. Over my piercing screeches of agony, I could barely hear the squelching noise of my eye being peeled from its home. Eventually, there was an unimaginable painful tug, and my left eyeball was suddenly in my hands. Half of my vision was gone. I tentatively lowered my palms, and my eyeball cascaded into them. It swam in a murky river of blood which was fed by a waterfall from my eye socket. I looked at the monitor with my remaining eye and saw my character clawing at his face in horror. I didn't think the silhouettes had eyes to lose, but perhaps I was wrong. Another pop-up. Would you like emergency medical care to stop the bleeding for minus 100,000 tokens? Twitching in a mixture of pain and shock, I shakily moved the mouse over to yes and clicked. The dripping from my eye socket abruptly halted. Something had stemmed the bleeding. I didn't dare look for a mirror to see how it looked. I thought that I might pass out. Tell me what's happening. You need to go through the door. The entity will be trying to destroy my code. I don't know how much time you have. I didn't need to be told again. I started to move my character toward the doorway. The game hurled numerous pop-up windows at me, obscuring my character's POV. All of your tokens have been deducted. Minus 50 energy, stop, you need to rest. You will be penalized. Pushing forwards as RipRip78 had instructed, I flew through the golden door. The chaos ceased. The pop-up windows vanished and the metrics at the bottom of my screen were suddenly full again. I found myself in a pitch-black void lit by a circle of 11 pixelated candles. They ever so slightly illuminated my silhouetted character, who was mostly submerged in the darkness of the endless, empty landscape. Alright, right, you're in the room I created. I included some code to keep your bars full for a little while, but we need to be quick. Pick up one of the candles and set your character on fire. This should, if I've developed it properly, cleanse your effigy. The game will no longer have a link to the inside of your real body. I immediately moved my character over to one of the candles. The option, Set Self Ablaze, appeared. But before I had a chance to click anything, a window abruptly popped up. Penalty. Without any instructions or offers, the toll was extracted. My left wrist suddenly snapped backwards and I yelped in pain, and one meager tear trickled from my remaining eye. I had nothing left to give. Even the horrifying torture was no longer evoking powerful reactions from me. I was gradually fading into the icy embrace of death. My left hand was flopped backwards over my wrist. I was completely incapacitated. I don't need it, I weakly thought to myself. As I continued moving my mouse with my right hand, I clicked on the option to Set Self Ablaze. My character combusted in less than a second and I winced, preparing myself to meet the same fate in real life. But I didn't. I was fine. I didn't feel the scorch of fire against my skin. And within moments, the inferno had extinguished, as had the 11 candles which encircled my character. He was no longer drowning in the darkness. My black silhouetted effigy was now a white silhouette. Good, it should be white. That means the first step of the ritual worked. You've severed the tie between your insides and the doll's insides, but we can't stop there, you're still connected. Your character has been reduced to a shell, but its outer body still has a connection to you. The game can still hurt you from the outside. Give me your address, I need to call an ambulance for you. Your injuries sound serious. When this is over, you'll need help. As if the real world had read RipRip78's message, another window suddenly displayed itself on the screen. Complete challenge for 1 million tokens. I didn't even have any options to choose. The window simply disappeared, replacing itself with one that read, "You selected a yes." The black landscape reverted back to the white one which I was so familiar with. My white silhouette had a black outline, much like the objects that were now forming across the game's environment. That means it's rewriting part of my code. The lake should be safe for now, I protected it. However, time is slipping away from us. This is the last part of the ritual. Enter the lake, cleanse your character, and it should safely disintegrate, severing your tie with the game once and for all. That was all well and good, but RipRip78 couldn't see what I could see. A maze was starting to build itself before me, and I had a feeling that the real world was concealing a lake right at the heart of it. This was the challenge. And don't trust the game, it doesn't want you to reach the lake. It wants to keep you trapped forever. I ignored RipRip78's warning and pressed forward into the labyrinth of threats that I was sure awaited me. Sprinting down a long tunnel, I entered the white, featureless maze. I had no idea which way to turn, but the game had a sadistic solution for that. The correct route will now be highlighted, and obstacles on dangerous routes will be activated. I sobbed in terror, looking at my broken wrist and tenderly raising my right hand towards my mangled left eye. There were 2 passageways before me, and spikes suddenly protruded from the floor and walls on the right-hand route. Drawing a deep breath, I started to move my character toward the left passageway, but then I stopped. What had Rip78 said? Don't trust the game. I realized that it wanted me to avoid the dangerous route. It wanted me to take the safe one. Looking down at my real-life feet, I felt my lip quiver in fear. This is going to hurt, I whispered to myself. I seized my last shred of bravery and charged along the right-hand route. The spikes were small, but they were sharp. Each step inflicted a new wound in my skin, bombarding me with waves of searing pain in the nerve endings of my feet. I could feel a puddle of blood starting to form across the study floor, but I didn't look down. My eyes were firmly fixated on the game and the challenge ahead. Reaching the end of the spiked passageway, I cried from a mixture of relief and horror. With renewed confidence and purpose, I pushed forwards. The next dangerous correct route was filled with the slivering pixelated outlines of small snakes. A pop-up window appeared. Take the safe path to avoid a penalty. I ignored it and ran through the narrow tunnel of hissing snakes. Weaving my character in and out of them, I believed that I might actually make it through the passage unscathed, but I was wrong. I screamed out in pain. One of them bit me. It didn't actually hurt as much as the spikes, but I had been psychologically prepared for those. I hadn't prepared myself for the possibility of being bitten. My character hopped from side to side in pain, and I let out a long exhale, deciding to keep moving. But the game informed me of something dreadful. Whoops, that snake was venomous. It looks like you need to administer an antidote within the next 60 seconds. I was feverish, and I had a feeling that it was nothing to do with the wave of fear coursing through my veins. Something else was coursing through my body. Buy an antidote, minus 1 million tokens. Sacrifice a friend, plus 0 tokens. A black silhouetted figure fell from the top of the screen, landing on the floor before my character. A voice started to sound over the speakers. Archie, the man's voice cried. It's Steve, I mean Rip78. God, I need your help, man. If you type the following sequence on your keyboard, you can override this hex. X9B. But his talking ceased. Steve's pleas continued, but they were reduced to muffles, as if the game had sealed his mouth or simply turned down his volume. Before I had a chance to act, the game chose for me. You do not have any tokens. You have chosen to sacrifice Steve. I didn't know whether I could live with another death on my conscience. Filled with terror, I begged the malevolent game to reconsider. Wait, I yelled. May I choose to not receive an antidote? There is a pause as Steve's silhouette squirmed in the floor of the maze, pinned down by some invisible force. The game presented another text box. Death is not an option. You have chosen to sacrifice Steve. Was he a friend? I mean, I didn't know him, not really, but I had heard his voice. He had fought to save my life, and he certainly felt like a friend, and his death was a truly harrowing spectacle. Steve's silhouetted body wriggled on the ground, and his arms and legs were plucked quickly and cleanly from his torso, as if some demented psychopath were butchering a microscopic ant in the playground. Without the antidote, I was starting to fade. Maybe that was a blessing. It meant that I barely registered as Steve's final torturous moments of life. His screams, though muted, were deafening. His torso and head were all that remained of his body, and the invisible force hoisted his squirming, mutilated, pixelated form into the air, presenting it to me as his movement slowed. His screams started to quiet. Seconds later, he was still and silent. Payment has been received. Antidote has been administered. I was alive, but barely. It was still impossible to ignore the pain in my eye socket, wrist, and feet. Everything was throbbing, but I couldn't quit. The deaths couldn't be meaningless. I wouldn't let that happen. I turned a corner and I saw it. The lake. A blue pool with a black outline, much like the golden doorway, had shone vividly in the heart of that lifeless landscape. There was an empty passageway leading towards it. The entity became desperate. Turn back. I didn't listen. I strolled onwards, but one final text box stopped me before I reached the lake. Resurrect Darcy for 0 tokens. Veil breaking is a free bonus feature of this incredible simulation. Her soul can be retrieved from beyond the veil. My heart pounded ferociously. I closed my eye and saw Darcy's face. Her luscious red hair, her pure smile, and then I saw something else. The dripping black liquid to which she had been reduced. I thought of Rip 78's message. Don't trust the game. Screw you, I whispered. On the verge of passing out from a mixture of traumatic stress, pain, and excessive blood loss, I moved my character forwards, striding into the lake. A piercing synth note rang through the speakers, pummeling my eardrums. I'm not sure what caused it, but it sounded as if the game itself were crying in agony. I ignored it, continuing to stride into the watery pool before me. I submerged my character beneath the surface of the lake and the synth screeched, faded away. His black outline slowly started to break up in the water, and the white silhouetted body faded. In a matter of moments, there was nothing left of the effigy. I collapsed to the floor from my desk chair, barely clinging to life, and I realized that it might have been pointless. I was free, but I might still die. Screw it, I groaned, hoisting myself back onto my desk chair. You're dying with me. One last pop-up appeared. Don't do it, you'll never be free. You'll always belong to the real world. I closed the game window, reaching beneath the desk. I pressed the eject button on the CD drive. Picking up the disc that had caused untold suffering over the past 24 hours, I was overcome with a feeling of dread. Oh, what if it kills me? Before I had a chance to reconsider, I squeezed the disc in my right hand, and it snapped. But that wasn't enough. I had to burn it. Fire cleanses everything, Steve said. I reached for the lighter on my desk, my dad's lighter. Yeah, thanks, you idiot, I muttered. Flicking it on, I held the tiny flame to the disc. It scorched the label a little, but it wasn't sufficient to burn through the plastic. I practically crawled into the kitchen, grabbed a half-empty bottle of vodka from one of my late-night drinking sessions. Man, it seemed like a lifetime ago, and I drenched the disc in it. I looked at the microwave. Now there's an idea, I mumbled. I opened the microwave door, threw the disc inside, and added a little more vodka for good measure, and I looked at the lighter. I didn't want to reach my one working hand in there and burn it. I set an envelope on fire, threw it into the microwave, and slammed the door shut. Flames started to roar within the enclosed space, but it wasn't good enough. I turned the microwave on. It's safe to say that carnage ensued. I remember crackles and bangs, and I remember smoke. I don't remember much else because my eyesight started to fade and I fell to the kitchen floor. I do remember hearing sirens though, ambulance sirens. I woke in a hospital bed. The staff were concerned to see me again, of course. There had been no sign of my father, and I had been to the hospital with severe injuries 2 times in the space of a day. My dad was no stranger to domestic abuse charges, so I let the hospital staff and the police draw their own conclusions. It was harder to lie to Darcy's parents. They told me that she had gone missing and asked whether she had contacted me. The coincidental timing of my hospital trip wasn't lost in them, but no charges were ever pressed. I don't think they truly believed that I would ever do anything to her. I think they're still hoping that their girl is coming home. Right now, I'm lying in a hospital bed typing this story. My left eye socket is bandaged, so I'm relieved I don't have to see the mess beneath it. My left wrist has been fitted with a metal rod to match the one in my left ankle. This morning, I asked one of the paramedics whether the disc had been destroyed. She said the entire microwave had been destroyed. That sounds promising to me. I don't think I'll ever find out where my dad bought the real world. I want to know, I want to find whoever sold it to him. But right now I'm back on the XI Discord. In honor of Darcy and Steve, I'm looking for answers. Is it all over? I think so. But still, every time I feel the pang of hunger, I start to yawn. I can't help but shudder at the slight possibility that I'm still tied to that horrifying game.